Elias looked down at the silver pocket watch in his hand. It was no longer a thing that tortured him. It was a key. The hands kept moving backward, unwinding the knot of time he tied around his own neck. He thought of the voices, the whispers in the dark, the hands pressing against glass from the other side. They had never been trying to break him. They had been trying to reach him. Every whisper, every flicker of light, every reflection that shouldn't have been there, all of it was the same thing said in a different way. He had refused to hear it.
You are keeping us in the dark.
They weren't haunting him. They were waiting for him, held in place not by the house, not by unfinished business, but by his own refusal to let them go. His grief had been so total, so consuming, that it had become a kind of cage. He had loved them so fiercely, he hadn't let them become what they needed to become. "I'm sorry." But this apology was different. It wasn't an apology for surviving. It was an apology for not living. "I'm sorry I didn't let you go." He stood. His body felt light, barely there. He turned, and they were there. Not inside the car, outside it, standing in the road, where the rain had stopped and the asphalt caught the light. Amber, blue, pink, three figures, still and quiet, watching him. They weren't waiting for him to die so they could be together again. They were waiting for him to live so the story could keep going. "I'm ready to wake up now." The lights moved toward him and folded around him. There was no crash, just warmth flowing in. He felt them not as something outside himself, but as something waking up inside his chest. The love he thought he'd lost wasn't gone. It had just moved to a part of the world his eyes couldn't reach. It was in the space between his heartbeats, in the silence between thoughts.
We are not gone. We are just different now.
The road, the rain, the wreckage, all of it came apart. The world went white, then gold, then a deep and peaceful dark. Elias closed his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, he didn't dream of the car. He dreamed of a wide, open ocean, and he was a wave coming home to shore. Elias opened his eyes. Morning light was coming through the window, turning the floating dust into tiny sparks. He was lying on the floor of the master bedroom in Blackwood Estate. The weight was gone. The walls were no longer breathing. They were just old plaster and loot. The smell of mildew was faint, not the smell of a tomb anymore, just an empty old building. Elias sat up. His body felt strange, lighter, like he'd taken off a heavy coat he'd been wearing so long he'd forgotten it was there. He reached into his pocket. The silver pocket watch was gone. He checked the floor, under the bed. Nothing. But as he stood, he caught himself in the antique mirror. The man looking back looked tired, but differently tired. Not the whole exhaustion of someone carrying something too long, the tiredness of someone who had finally set it down. His face carried the lines of a long, hard time, but they sat differently now, like marks left by weather, not wounds still open. But his eyes were different, most of all. The sharpness, the tight guarded look he'd built to keep the world out was gone. What was there instead was quiet, clear, older in the way that only comes from understanding something, not from losing it. He looked at his reflection and for a moment he thought he saw something flicker deep in his own eyes. Amber, blue, and the softest pink, warm and brief, then gone. Elias smiled. It was small and a little fragile, but it was real. He understood then what had happened. He'd come to Blackwood Estate to find a ghost, and he had. He'd found the ghost of Elias Dawn, the man who died on a wet road 20 years ago, and he'd finally let him rest. He walked out of the bedroom and into the hall. The corridor was just a long, dusty passage. The house was quiet. Nothing queer about that, at least. That is what Elias thought. He kept walking. He had made it maybe 5 steps before he noticed it. At the far end of the corridor, peering from behind a cracked door, was a head. Slim, long, unmistakably a horse. He decided to walk a bit closer to see if his vision was playing tricks on him. As he approached, he saw that this was indeed a horse, looking out from the darkened room. He was confused as to why it was in sight, but realized it might explain the knocking he had heard as he was coming inside the mansion. When it stepped out fully, upright in a brown period jacket and breeches that seemed just a little stiff for a horse, standing with the quiet confidence of someone who absolutely belonged there, Elias stopped. Not a horse, a guy with a horse head. They looked at each other across the length of the dusty corridor for what felt like a very long time. The staircase was at the end of the corridor, behind the horseman. Elias was going to have to walk past him. But instead, what happened was that the horseman walked right up to him. The horseman looked at him. He looked at the horseman. Neither of them said anything, because what is there really to say? Then the horseman leaned in slightly. Then, without breaking eye contact, he dabbed, clean, decisive to the left, then he straightened up, gave Elias a single nod, and walked past him down the corridor, as if it had somewhere important to be and was already slightly late. Elias stood very still. He had faced the darkest corners of his own mind. He had stared down 20 years of grief and guilt and come out the other side a changed man. He was not rattled. He was fine. He was completely, absolutely fine. He walked to the stairs, gripped the banister, and descended at at a pace that could generously be described as calm and not at all like a man who had just been abducted by a horse. Elias didn't pick up his EMF meter or his voice recorder. He left them on the desk in the library. The tools of work he didn't do anymore. He walked down the grand staircase, his boots echoing on the wood, and pushed open the front door. The mist had lifted. Morning sun was blazing over the countryside, and everything was green. The kind of green that looks almost unreal. The sky was white and blue, beautiful and endlessly clear. Elias stepped out onto the porch and breathed in deep. He stood there for a long moment, feeling the sun on his face, listening to birds in the overgrown garden. He didn't look back at the house. There was nothing left for him there. Whatever the house had held, it had given up. The haunting was gone. Elias Stone walked down the path toward the iron gate, hands in his pockets, whistling a tune he hadn't thought of since he was a kid. He walked toward what came next. That was enough. That had always been enough. He just hadn't known it until now.